Welcome to the complete user's guide for the Canon M50. In this free masterclass, you're gonna learn the best settings for video, whether vlogging or YouTube talking head videos. You're gonna learn the easiest way to take incredible photos, whether you're leveling up your thumbnails or you wanna take pictures of your family. And you'll even learn how to use the M50 as a webcam for live streaming or video conference calls. And lastly, you'll learn about the best lenses and accessories for the Canon M50, all in this comprehensive, free user's guide to the Canon M50. So grab your coffee, grab your cameras, and let's get into it.
You gotta just press record.
Hey, what's up? It's Omar Altakori with Think Media, helping you build your influence with online video. And on this channel, sometimes we do YouTube strategy videos, as well as camera tutorials just like this one. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. Now, I wanted to take a few minutes to teach you about 7 tips and tricks when it comes to the Canon M50, and I know you'll learn something you might have not known. Let's go. So tip number 1 is pick your frame rate. It's really important to ask, what will my final product be? Do you want to slow down footage, or are you just gonna shoot real-time stuff like this or even vlogging? And so what's cool about the Canon M50 is it shoots in 4K at 24 frames per second, and then the other frame rates are accessible at 1080p. So in 1080p, you can choose to shoot in 24 frames, 30 frames, or 60 frames. What's also cool about the M50 is you can shoot in 120 frames. You just have to access that through the menu and then turn on high frame rate. So 90% of the videos we usually shoot here on Think Media are shot in 30 frames per second, but because we wanted to use the 4K on the M50, which only allows you to shoot in 24 frames, we made this final project 24 frames. So in all the slowed down clips, we're actually shooting in either 60 frames or 120, slowed down to 24 frames per second. But that's just something to keep in mind when choosing your frame rate. Am I gonna slow this video down, or is this just regular vlogging? And in that case, I would suggest doing it in either 30 or 24 frames. And just to keep in mind, all the footage used in this video is upscaled to 4K from the 1080 files, just to keep in mind, but this talking head portion was shot in 4K. The second tip is to choose your autofocus method. What's so cool about this M50 is it has Canon's infamous dual pixel autofocus in 1080. And so the way you access the autofocus method you want to choose for most of your videos is you're gonna hit Q on the screen. Right underneath your video setting, you're gonna hit AF, and then you have the 3 options they give you, but we love shooting on the tracking system because you can simply tap whatever you want in focus and then it'll focus super easy. One thing to keep in mind is to make sure your servo AF is turned on. When you turn it off, the box around a face or a subject will be grayed out, but when it's on, it'll actually be white. So just make sure that is on, and that's pretty much the best focus settings for video. Tip number 3 is the best setting for vlogging. A lot of people buy the Canon M50 for vlogging because it has the flip up screen and it's super easy to just tap on your face and create content. And you know, the thing about vlogging is you don't wanna have to always constantly think about the settings. So here's 2 different ways that you can set it and forget it, and you can choose which one you like to go with. The first one is going into movie mode, and instead of having it on manual exposure, you wanna put it on auto exposure. What's great about this is the camera will just work with the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture all in tandem to get you the best quality as much as possible. All right, this is a movie exposure auto. I better reset it and forget it. In and out of shading, but like it adjusts the lighting, and it's moving all kinds of things. It's changing shutter, it's changing aperture, it's changing ISO. So could kind of mess up in regards of doing different, like the way it looks, because it's messing with everything. The second mode, and the one I like using for vlogging, is shutter priority. What's cool about shutter priority is it locks in your shutter, so if I'm shooting 30 frames per second, I can just put it at 60, and so I know that the camera is gonna work the aperture and the ISO, if you put it on auto, around the shutter speed, which is a great rule to live by if you want the smoothest looking footage possible. And this is the shutter priority example, probably a little bit more smooth than the auto exposure movie mode, but you know, simply just putting it on auto ISO and then hitting record and you're good to go. All right, now this is shutter priority. I like this because your shutter speed does not change, your aperture will, and also your ISO. And it's just a good setting just because your video will actually look smooth all the way through, because the shutter speed rule is not being compromised. Tip number 4 is set your audio settings to manual. The Canon M50 is super great because it has a mic jack input and a hot shoe mount, so you could put external audios to increase your audio quality. However, you don't want to shoot your audio on auto because it could sound like this. All right, so if you got an external mic, you plugged into the camera and you just left it on auto, this is what you'll get as far as audio sounds, but we highly encourage, make sure you change that to manual. As you can hear from that clip, it just sounded a little distorted and a little loud. mode. However, if you go into your camera settings and change it from audio to manual, then go to record level, drop it all the way down to 0 and go up 1 notch, you are good to go. And now your audio can sound like this. All right, so this is an audio test of the setting on manual and then up 1 notch. And 9 times out of 10 when you're using Canon, this is the way to go. If you're using an external mic, you know, just change your audio setting from auto to manual, up 1 notch, and it's gonna sound way better. So making that simple adjustment in your audio settings will level up your audio. And if you wanted to know what mic we were actually using the Deity D3 shotgun mic for that audio test. But there are a lot of great mics that you can use based on your budget. And if you haven't downloaded it yet, we actually break down all the various mics for different budgets at our gear guide at thinkmediagearguide.com. Make sure you check out that link in the description below and download that free gear guide so you can choose the best mic for your budget. Tip number 5 is turn on your image stabilization. What's cool about this is it simply, when you turn it on, is it smooths out your footage. And I love shooting things handheld, and most people are gonna shoot things handheld. And so to eliminate like jitter and camera shake, simply turn it on, set it and forget it, and your footage will be a lot more smoother. Tip number 6 is consider investing in lens adapters. What's so cool about the Canon M50 is you can pop on these lens adapters and it can allow you to use Canon's full line of lenses, which could potentially save you money in the long run. For example, Canon's famous nifty 50 lens, which a lot of people love and have, but you can't put this lens directly on the camera because it's a different lens mount. But with Canon's adapter, you could simply put it onto the adapter and then put the adapter onto the M50. The second adapter we recommend is the VILTROX adapter. Simply put, is it turns your M50 into a full frame camera because there's a glass mechanism that kind of expands the field of view. And so it's a kind of cool life hack way to get the most out of your M50 with other Canon lenses. And the 7th tip is to use the custom menu setting to save you time. What's so cool about the Canon M50 is that in menu, you can add the various things you find yourself changing often into one single place. So many of the things that I talked about in this video, like your audio settings, your image stabilization, the high frame rate and stuff like that, you can actually add onto your custom menu settings so you don't have to dig through your menus every time you want to change something simple like format your card. Now, definitely hands down, one of my favorite things about the Canon M50 is how good it is at autofocus. The ability to just focus on your face, to tap on something and then it focus on that. Unfortunately though, when I first got the Canon M50, I tapped a button on the screen and it disabled all my autofocus settings. And I think it's just important to know how you can maximize the autofocus features on this camera. So let's jump into a quick guide on how to focus with the Canon M50. You know, this camera does shoot in 4K, however, there's a crop factor, and it also eliminates Canon's dual pixel autofocus. So what you want to do is change your video resolution from 4K to 1080, and you can do that by tapping the quick mode on the screen, going down to 60 or 30 frames per second. In this case, we're going to use 30 frames per second. Now you can see the different autofocus methods that this camera offers. The first one is face tracking. We love using face tracking here because what's so cool about the selfie screen is you can simply select face tracking, tap on your face, and the camera is gonna lock in focus the entire time. The next one is zone autofocus, and this is a little bit more of a bigger box, but is gonna lock in focus based off the area you select. So if you're doing product stuff or you wanna rack focus different areas, this is a great option. And the last one is 1-point autofocus, and that is a smaller box that allows you to focus more or less on people or smaller objects, unlike zone autofocus, which would be great for cars or bigger objects. But we suggest simply using face tracking when you're using the Canon M50 because it's super easy. Whether you're in front of the camera or you're vlogging, you can simply tap on the screen, lock in focus, or if you're behind the camera, it allows you to track a person's face and or moving subject. So with the Canon M50, when you jump from 1080 to 4K, you lose the dual pixel autofocus, making it a contrast-based autofocus in the camera, which isn't as trustworthy. You're gonna find it kind of hunting. However, we do like using the 4K. You just need to lock in focus in advance. And so this is what you're gonna wanna do. First, we're gonna change it from 30 frames per second into 4K 24 frames per second. As you notice, there's a crop factor that took place. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna jump into menu. Under the camera icon in menu number 4, we're gonna turn focus mode from autofocus to manual focus, AF to MF. Then you're gonna jump over to the 5th menu and go to manual focus peaking settings. Focus peaking is a great tool to use when using manual focus because it gives you a visual color reference based off of what's in focus. So when you're racking focus, it'll put color around what's in focus. So what you wanna do is go into MF peaking settings, turn it from off to on, select the level you wanna go with. In this case, we're gonna use high, and then select the color you want to use. Use a color that's going to stand out from the situation that you're shooting in. Now you're ready to set focus. So you're going to click the magnifying glass on the screen. You're allowed to use your touch screen to drag based off of what subject you want to focus on. And then as you focus, you're going to see that the red outline or whatever color you decided will outline what you're focusing on. Just keep in mind, if you want that dual pixel autofocus, you can only access it through 1080 or lower. And we love using 1080p and shooting with the face tracking autofocus method on, because if you're doing traditional vlog content or YouTube content, simply tapping on your face with the selfie screen or tapping with a subject who's moving, it just works really great and is super trustworthy. And although the M50 has a slight learning curve when shooting in 4K, using the peaking settings will definitely allow you to get the best image quality out of this camera. And so if you are either working behind this camera, able to lock in focus, or you're shooting a non-moving subject, by all means using 4K is awesome. Did you know that the Canon M50 was actually Canon's best-selling camera with interchangeable lenses in this last year? Yes, and that is because it's a great beginner's camera, and also it's a camera that a lot of people are buying to shoot YouTube videos. And typically when you're starting off shooting YouTube videos, you're usually filming yourself, and you know, maybe this is the first camera you've ever purchased. And so in this next section, I'm gonna teach you the best settings for talking head YouTube videos, as well as the best settings when it comes to vlogging. So let's get into it. Tip number one is to change your display mode from guided to standard. The Canon M50 is a great beginner camera and has a great beginner mode. However, to get the best looking video, you want full control over all your settings, so make sure you change it from guided to standard. Tip number two is to put it in movie mode and change your exposure from auto to manual. This will give you full control over your ISO, your shutter speed, and your aperture. Tip number three is double your shutter speed. Depending on whether you choose to shoot in 24, 30, or 60 frames per second, you simply want to double your shutter speed based off that. For this video, we're shooting in 30 frames per second, so our shutter speed is 1/60th of a second. Tip number four is to lower your aperture. If you want to create that separation or that blurry background behind you, you're going to want your aperture to be as low as possible. Now, if you have the kit lens that came with the camera, chances are you're not going to get that super blurry background look. However, you may want to consider investing in a lens that gives you that blurry background. The one we like using for basic YouTube videos is the Canon 22mm f2 lens. Simply dropping it all the way down to f2 gives me that blurry background look that everybody loves. Tip number five is to adjust your ISO. You want to make sure that your exposure meter is at 0 once you dial in all your settings. So you've doubled your shutter speed based off your frame rate, you've lowered your aperture as much as possible, and now you need to crank down or crank up your ISO based off the exposure meter. Tip number six is to set your white balance based off of your environment. You don't want to shoot your YouTube videos in auto white balance because it'll constantly change throughout your videos, and so when you're making these jump cuts or if you're editing it through, you might see change in temperature, which you don't want. So set your white balance in advance. We recommend buying a white balance card. These are very inexpensive from Amazon, and we'll put a link in the description below if you want to check it out. But these help you set the white balance with all your lighting setup, whether you're using a window light, you know, LED lighting or whatever. You can simply set your custom white balance using the card, and the camera will then adjust white balance for you. The second way to set your white balance based off your environment is to go into your white balance settings, select color temperature, and then adjust the color temperature based off your environment. And 4500 is based off of this LED light hitting my face, which is like daytime, so 4500 is a good rule of thumb to start off with. Tip number seven is to maintain a consistent workflow. If you're shooting in 30 frames per second like we do here on Think Media many of the times, you want to make sure your timeline settings or your project settings is 30 frames per second. And then when you export the video, you wanna make sure you're setting that to 30 frames per second. Many times along the process when shooting and editing a video, you can actually ruin the quality of your video. So just make sure if you're shooting 30 frames per second in your camera, you're going to edit a 30 frames per second project file, and then you're going to export a 30 frames per second project file. Just keep that in mind whenever you're doing video, keep it consistent. What I love about vlogging is that you don't always have to be thinking about your camera settings because it's more important to capture the content, right? You're telling a story regardless of all your settings, and the way it looks doesn't have to be perfect. The nature of vlogging is kind of imperfect. And so I love the Canon M50 because it's super easy to use, and we're gonna jump right into all the tips. Tip number 1 is to set your camera in movie mode and set the exposure to auto. You can ensure your camera's in auto exposure by selecting choose mode once you hit the dial to movie mode, and then just make sure it's on movie auto exposure. You can also get to it by hitting the Q button, hitting the camera up on the top left, and then selecting auto exposure. Tip number 2 is to set your frame rate. And we like here at Think Media to shoot most of our content in 29.97 frames per second or 30 frames per second. But some people like that camcorder look, and that would be that 60 frames per second. A lot of images being captured per second gives you kind of that like reality TV vibe, that camcorder vibe. And so if you like that, that's cool too. And when selecting a frame rate, I would encourage to not shoot your vlogs in 4K because you will lose the Canon dual pixel autofocus, and there's also a crop factor. So for those two reasons, just shoot in 1080. Once you've selected your frame rate, you are going to set your exposure meter to 0, and this is just a starting point. The thing about auto exposure is the camera is gonna do its best job to adjust the exposure of your image. Now, if you're shooting against lighting, it's probably gonna get your image really dark because it's trying to expose for the highlights. The way you wanna brighten or darken your image, the only thing you really have to mess with, if you need to mess with it, is the exposure meter, and that's simply just dragging your thumb left and right. Go left if you wanna make your image darker, go right if you wanna make your image brighter. The next thing you're gonna do is set your autofocus to tracking. So you're gonna hit the quick menu button and then select AF method tracking. That's the one on the farthest left. This is the best for vlogging. Simply tap and focus and you're good to go. The next thing you wanna do is set your white balance to auto, and how you're gonna do that is, again, you're gonna hit the the next thing is you're gonna wanna set your white balance to auto. Now you can hit the quick menu setting again, go to your white balance setting, and if it's on a preset, you wanna make sure you set it to auto because, again, this is a set it and forget it setup, and so you don't wanna be shooting in tungsten lighting when you're outside. Your image is gonna be way cold, and so just make sure you put it on auto white balance, and you'll never have to worry about it after that. What's cool about the Canon M50 and a lot of Canon cameras is that they include a preamp for microphones, and so you don't have to bump up your audio so high to get good audio. What you're gonna do is set it to manual, then you just wanna set the notch to right around -6 to when you're talking. And the way to test that is to simply put your screen in selfie mode, face it towards you, and set your audio settings that way. That way you dial it in based off your vlog setup. All right, we're almost there. I got one more tip, but real quick, question of the day is, what do you like vlogging? Do you like doing travel vlogs, food vlogs, and stuff like that? I personally love shooting stuff of my daughter and my family. I think it's a cool way to just capture the moment. Let me know in the comment section below. And the last tip is to consider investing in wide lenses. If you plan on vlogging, the best thing you can do is actually get wide angle lenses because you can keep your hand fairly close, which keeps the mic close to you, but yet the shot looks wide. And just a few lenses to consider. We love the Canon 11 to 22mm lens, super wide lens, perfect for vlogging. And Sigma just dropped a 16mm lens that you probably want to check out, 1.4 lens. So gives you that super blurry background, just a great all-around lens for YouTube and vlogging. A lot of people do buy this camera to shoot videos and things like that, but what a lot of people don't know is that this is actually an incredible camera for photography. And you know, there's a simple way to take really awesome photos with this camera, whether you're wanting to level up your thumbnails for your YouTube videos, or if you wanna just take great photos of your family and your kids and things like that. And so let's jump into this quick photography guide on how to take the best photos with the Canon M50. So when the Canon M50 first came out, we were super pumped about it, not only because of its small form factor, its ability to shoot incredible video, having incredible autofocus, but because of it being a mirrorless camera, it actually makes taking photos a lot easier than your traditional DSLR. So why is that? That is because this is a mirrorless camera, and so you essentially get to see the photo you're gonna take before you take it. With traditional DSLRs, you always usually would have to take a test shot because the viewfinder would be optical and not digital. When you use this viewfinder and or screen, it is digital, and so you get to see your settings in real time, not having to take test shots to make sure your settings are right. If it looks good to the eye looking into the camera, then that's the image you're gonna get. Just a quick note before we get into the rest of the video is this video is not a pro level photography video. This video is for those who just want an easy way to get the best photos possible with their Canon M50s. And so with that being said, the first thing I want you to do is to set your display mode from guided to standard. The M50 is a great camera for beginners, and I love the idea that it has a guided mode. However, it does restrict you from being able to do a lot of custom things when you have the guided mode on. So changing it to standard will help you get the most out of your M50. The next thing you're gonna wanna do is change your dial to the M, which is manual. This is a great mode to really have full control over all your settings like ISO, aperture, shutter speed, and things of that nature. Don't get overwhelmed. I think there's a great rule of thumb to get started when you're shooting in manual, and that is simply setting your shutter speed to 1/125th of a second, lowering your aperture to as low as possible, and setting your ISO to auto. This will allow your camera to do most of the work in exposing your image. Now, if you need to darken your image, you're gonna crank up your shutter as needed until your exposure meter is at around 0. I just think 1/125th of a second is a good place to start, especially when shooting indoors or when the sun is setting. I don't encourage going lower than 1/125th of a second for your shutter speed because holding the camera handheld, it's hard to keep steady as a photographer and not provide motion blur. Now, if you're using a tripod, you can get away with lowering your shutter speed to a little bit lower than that. However, either way, I don't encourage going that low, and really pushing it is like 1/60th of a second. So just keep that in mind when taking photos, especially when you're shooting handheld. The next step is changing your image quality to RAW. If you plan on editing your photos on your laptop or on your computer using programs like Adobe Lightroom or any other photo editing software, having a RAW image file is best to work with because it retains the most detail and data. The best illustration I could think about is like baking a cake. What, Omar? We're talking about photography. What do you talk about baking a cake? So essentially, shooting RAW images is like the ingredients of a cake. You can manipulate it. You can, add a little bit more sugar. You can add in a little bit more milk, add another egg, or in photography terms, you can bring down the highlights a little bit, bring up the shadows because there's so much that you can still maneuver with because it's a RAW file. Now, a JPEG is like the final baked cake. Once you take the cake out of the oven, you can't really adjust the ingredients of the cake. And so when you tell your camera to only shoot in JPEG, you're actually limiting your ability to change some of the settings in post. And so a good rule of thumb is to shoot in RAW. If you don't really care to actually edit your images in post, then by all means shoot in JPEG. And I think the best way to do that is to shoot in the large JPEG file, just so you're shooting the biggest picture possible. But we really encourage shooting in RAW, especially if you plan on editing your photos in post. The next tip is your autofocus settings. When you're looking in your camera, make sure you tap the Q on the top right, and then on the top left where it says AF, you wanna make sure you select tracking as your autofocus mode, and then on your autofocus operation right below, you want to change it from one shot to servo. What's great about servo is it simply tracks whatever you tap to focus on, and whether you move or whether the subject moves, it'll keep them in focus. Which brings me to the next tip, and that is touch shutter. The M50 has a cool feature that allows you to simply tap on a subject, focus on it, and it'll take the picture all with one tap. That makes taking photos very, very easy. However, if you ever wanted to play with the autofocus, like tap on a subject and then move around, and you didn't want it to take a picture, you simply have to toggle it off by tapping the icon on the bottom left of the screen. Once you tap it, it disables it, and then you can simply tap on stuff and you no longer have to worry about it taking a picture. Now, if you just want to turn it back on, tap on the screen, and now you've enabled it, and you're good to go. The next step is to consider investing in prime lenses. Prime lenses are probably the most affordable way to get the most pro-looking photos possible. The reason being is because whenever looking at a photo, usually the distinguishing factor is that super blurry background. And when you have your subject in focus and that background super blurry, pictures usually look pretty darn cool. And the way to achieve that is with very low apertures. If you bought the M50 and it came with a lens, the likelihood is that you got a kit lens with that camera. And kit lenses aren't really designed to get you that super blurry background. And the next tip is to use presets on your photos. What I love about presets is they just simply bring your images to life. If you follow somebody on Instagram and you love their account, maybe there's some consistency there, or there's a vibe that you see. The likelihood is that they are using a preset on all their photos. And so it's really key if you wanna create a vibe with your photography to find a preset that works best for you. I actually sell my own presets. If you wanna check those out, I'll put a link to them in the description below. But I've designed these presets to look good on any kind of photos you take. So whether you're doing landscape or if you're doing portrait photography, these presets are designed to look great on no matter what kind of photos you take. Boom, and just like that, you can take awesome photos to level up your social media game, take awesome photos of your family. I think Ruby, my little daughter, looks super cute in those photos. But hey, if you're getting value in this video, why don't you smash the like button to let me know? And question for you is, what is your favorite thing about the Canon M50? Let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear why you love this camera.
for me, it probably is the flip out screen and its ability to autofocus. Just makes it super easy to use, set it and forget it, and you got it good. But again, let me know down in the comments below. But it's really a game changer to invest in a prime lens. Like I mentioned in that quick photography guide, but this is really a $100 lens or so, and it really gives you that blurry background, and really tacking it onto this VILTROX adapter, which is another $150, you can achieve really great professional photos for legit under $300, which is awesome. But if you didn't know about these things, links in the description below if you wanna check those out. But what's also cool, this camera is so awesome. Another way you can actually use this camera is as your webcam. If you're doing live streaming, or if you wanna do conference calls and things like that, like if you're using Zoom, you can use your M50 for zooming your Zoom calls. Can you even zoom your Zoom calls? But this is how you're gonna do it, and there's a few different ways you can do it, so check this out. Now, before we get into the various ways that you can live stream with the Canon, I want you to do a few things. First, set your camera to 1080, and then set your focus mode to face tracking. By doing this, you'll get the best autofocus settings, and then I'll get into the rest of the other settings later in this video, so make sure to watch this video the whole way through. The first way to stream with your M50 is to use it with a USB. This method works with many other Canon cameras as well, but if you wanna see the full list of Canon cameras that this works with, we'll put a link to that in the description below. And really all you have to do is download the driver from the Canon website, hook up your M50, and you're good to go. This by far is the easiest and cheapest way to use your Canon M50 as a webcam, but depending on the length of your micro USB, you may wanna grab a long one, so you're not limited to where you place your camera, and we'll put a link to a good one in the description as well. But this is a very trustworthy option, because when we first tested this way, we got it up and running in literally less than 5 minutes for a live stream. And so super cool way, but only works best with PC right now. And I know they're working on a Mac version of this. However, it isn't quite there yet, but I'm sure they'll get it down pretty soon. Now, there's something to know if you are using a MacBook or an iMac and you have the M50 and you wanna use it as your webcam, and it is to either use a special software. The one that we would recommend is called Ecamm Live. This, like many others, is a paid subscription, but that's following the free 14-day trial. But what's cool about this program is it actually will read your Canon camera via USB, but the only limiting thing about this option is if you use Ecamm Live, you can only use it for live streaming to things like Twitch, Facebook, or YouTube, but you wouldn't be able to use it for things like Zoom calls, Google Hangouts, or even StreamYard, which we love using it for that purpose for sure. Now, if you do want to use your Canon M50 for your Apple device, then you might want to look into investing into a capture card. And what we recommend is the Elgato Camlink. This comes in at around $200, but I love the Elgato Camlink. It's essentially a plug and play option. You literally plug it in USB and it converts your HDMI into a USB, and then you can access your camera no matter what program or streaming software you're using. So I do love that as an option, but I definitely think that Canon is working its way to make sure that the Apple user gets to use their Canon M50 with a USB. So if you're in a pinch, maybe you want to invest in that Elgato Camlink, but if not, just wait it out. I'm pretty sure that they're gonna come up with something in the near future. Now, if you're getting value in this video, why don't you hit the like button for me? Thank you so much. And question for you is, do you live stream or do you plan on live streaming? Let me know in the comment section below. And regardless of whatever way you plan on using the M50 to live stream, it'd be wise to invest into a battery power adapter so that you have unlimited battery. The worst thing it would be if you were mid live stream or mid Zoom call and your camera died. Maybe invest in getting a long USB cord so you're not limited to where you put the M50, and then maybe a tabletop tripod so you can adjust it to your liking. But we'll put all our recommendations down in the description below, so make sure you check out those links. So once you have your camera showing up on your computer, you can change all your settings without touching the camera via the Canon utility app. So that's if you're using the USB option, obviously. But the first thing is to set your frame rate and shutter speed. We recommend for live streaming to use either 30 or 60 frames per second, and you can select that by hitting the quick menu button on your screen, selecting your frame rate. And now, because we are choosing 30 frames, we're going to also change our shutter speed to 1/60th of a shutter. If you selected 60 frames per second, then your shutter will be 1/125th of a second. But once you do this, the next thing you want to do is then frame your shot. Place your camera where you want it to live for the live stream. And if you have a zoom lens or the ability to zoom, you wanna make sure you lock that in too as well. I like shooting a little bit wide because the aperture can be a little bit lower. But once you have that part down, the next thing is to set your exposure. Bring your aperture down to around 2.0 to 3.5, and if you're using a lens that came with the camera or what you would consider a kit lens, then you probably can only go as low as 3.5 when zoomed all the way out, and so that's just something to keep in mind. But that'll give you the most background blur for that lens. But if you have a lens like the Sigma 16mm 1.4, then you can get that super blurry background, bringing your aperture way down. And I would suggest to keep it at around f2 just to make sure all of your face is in focus. And after setting your aperture, then the next thing is to set your ISO to auto. Now, all you have to do at this point is set your exposure meter to get the proper exposure. If you need it to go brighter, just increase the exposure. If you need to get darker, just bring it down. A quick power tip is to definitely get lighting on your face, whether you're using a window or an LED light. It'll just make your image look a lot better. After you have that all set up, then get your colors right by setting your white balance to either auto or use the presets that come with the camera, depending on your lighting situation. The next thing you want to change is your picture style, which there's a ton to choose from, but choose the one that you like best. And one thing to note is it doesn't really look the exact same as what it looks like in the flip out screen. So watch your computer as you change it until you find the look you like. Whoa, pretty sweet, right? That you can actually use the Canon M50 for your webcam. I think just looking better at your Zoom call meetings could probably make you look that much more professional. I always say now in the age that we live in, rather than dressing up and smelling good, the way you can actually look good at your job is just looking super crispy clean, better than everybody else, so you're welcome. But nonetheless, I wanted to point your attention to the sponsor of this video, and that is our free 1-hour masterclass. And in this class, you will learn the 3 secrets to YouTube success and how you can dominate YouTube this year. So check out that free 1-hour class by clicking the link down in the description below. I know you'll find something you didn't know about YouTube, and it'll help you in your journey of making money on YouTube. Now, the next portion I wanted to talk about were some of the best lenses for the Canon M50 when it came to vlogging or doing YouTube videos, just like talking head, kind of like this. And so let's check out that video.
So when building out your vlog setup, there's definitely a ton of things to be thinking about in regards to like what your stabilization is gonna be or your audio is gonna be. But what's also very important is what lens you decide to go with. What's really crazy about cameras that have interchangeable lenses is that usually you can buy a camera and invest in a lens that will really make the camera come alive. A lot of the times people buy kit lenses, which I'll go over in just a second, but a lot of the times kit lenses don't get you the best looking footage. The other thing to consider is potentially weight, image stabilization, and also field of view. And so at the end of this video, hopefully you can make a decision on which lens would be best for your vlog setup. Let's go. So the first lens I wanna bring up is the kit lens that comes with the Canon M50, and that is a 15 to 45 millimeter 3.5 to 5.6 lens. Now this is a good lens because it does give you the ability to zoom into something all the way from 15 to 45. However, because it's not a constant zoom lens, your aperture is gonna automatically change as you zoom, which with a crop censored camera, if you're shooting at 45 millimeters and your aperture has to be at 5.6, the likelihood is that your ISO is gonna be compromised, then introducing grain, then lowering your image quality. We do like to share with our Think Media community that if you are planning on buying a new camera, to consider the content you're trying to create. Because if you know you're gonna buy a new camera, you can actually save money by just buying the body. And so if you just buy the body knowing that you're gonna invest in a better lens, you'll save money, and then you can put that money toward a better lens. So we like to ask, what are you usually gonna use your camera for? Is it vlogging? Is it talking head videos? Because all this stuff comes into consideration when selecting a lens. But with all that being said, the kit lens that the Canon M50 comes with is a decent vlogging lens, especially at 15 millimeters wide and at 3.5 apertures. However, if you do buy the camera with a kit lens, or maybe you already own the kit lens, I do want to show you what's possible with investing in potentially other lenses. The next vlogging lens I want to bring up is an awesome lens, and that is the 11 to 22 millimeter f4 to 5.6 wide zoom lens. Now this lens is super sweet because of how wide it is. At 11 millimeters, you're talking super wide field of view, and at f4, it is going to give you a nice little crispy decent blurry background, not completely blurred out. Nonetheless, with how much you're capturing during your vlogging, it's gonna be really nice. It's almost like vlogging essentially with a GoPro. And what I love about this lens as well is how light it is. It's a super light lens, and you do have the ability to zoom in a little bit, but again, like the last lens, it is not a constant aperture. And so when zooming into 22 millimeters, you're gonna find that your aperture is gonna go up to 5.6, then messing with your settings. However, if you plan on just keeping it at 11, you're gonna be good to go. But this is your most ideal vlogging lens because of its weight and size. Now, I would say the cons of this lens is that it's just simply not universal. So if you plan on doing YouTube talking head videos or even like a lecture or something, this lens doesn't really lend itself to that. However, this is a vlog lens video. I just wanted to mention that if you do invest in the 11 to 22 millimeter, it is gonna be tough because you're not gonna be able to use it for kind of any other situation other than vlogging. So just a quick recap, we covered the 15 to 45 kit lens and then now the 11 to 22 wide zoom lens. A key thing to mention about these two lenses is that they both have image stabilization in the lens, which is super sweet when you're considering vlogging. However, most Canon cameras have the ability to turn on electronic image stabilization. So if a lens does not have image stabilization, you could turn it on and it will help a little bit. But turn that on, add a lens that does have image stabilization, and now you have this dual image stabilization. Your footage is gonna look super smooth and not shaky, especially if you're doing like rock climbing and hiking and stuff like that with your camera.
Rock climbing.
Now let's talk about the Sigma 16 millimeter 1.4 lens for Canon EF-M mounts. Now this Sigma lens is one of the best lenses you can buy for your Canon M50 or Canon mirrorless camera like the Canon M6 because of simply its low aperture and its ability to really give you that blurry background. Now the difference between this lens and the other two I mentioned is there's no zoom on this lens, and so you would consider this lens a prime lens. Prime lenses are awesome because they're able to be fast, and what that means is you can simply crank down your aperture to as low as 1.4 on this lens, or even like the Canon Nifty 50 that a lot of people know about, that's like a 1.8 lens, but you yourself has to move and you have no ability to zoom. Prime lenses do have rings on it, but it's never a zoom ring, it is a focus ring, and so if you wanted to manually focus, you totally could. However, the autofocus on this lens is incredible. We love this lens so much because of its field of view. At 16 millimeters, it's almost like a 24 millimeter on a full frame camera, and which is a fairly medium field of view, so it's not as wide as 11 millimeters, so you're not getting that super almost GoPro look, but it is good enough. If you're holding a Joby GorillaPod and it's arm's length distance from you, you're gonna get enough distance from you and your background to see everything that needs to be seen. Another reason why we love this lens is because it's just a good focal range for talking head YouTube. Like right now, I'm using this 16 millimeter on our camera to film this video, and so you can see that the camera is where it needs to be based off of the shot, but if you wanted to zoom in, you would actually just have to bring the camera closer, or if you wanted to zoom out, you'd bring it further. One thing to note about this lens is there is no image stabilizer in the lens itself. So with this lens, we're really relying on that electronic image stabilization that the Canon cameras offer, which is again, no big deal because of the image quality it's producing. I mean, even for photography, these photos are looking super clean with this lens. And what's cool is because it's a little wider than your traditional 50 millimeter or like 85 millimeter portrait lens, is that it does give off a vibe. It's a little bit more wide, but at the same time, just its versatility at 16 millimeters on a crop censored camera serves as one of the best lenses you can buy for vlogging. Now, if you've ever bought a camera with a kit lens, you've probably felt that you don't have any need to invest in another lens. I would actually say it's unfortunate, but I feel like camera companies throw in that kit lens to kind of suit your needs up front. But kit lenses are usually not gonna be money makers. Kit lenses will usually never give you that super blurry background or even produce the results you're seeing on either Instagram or online, because most of the time, people are using really nice lenses or really nice glass. So with that being said, the Sigma 16 millimeter comes in at around $450, which is very similar to how much you can buy the Canon M50's bodies for, which may be hard to hear because you can actually buy the Canon M50 and with a kit lens refurbished for about $480. However, that setup may not give you the image you're looking for. The image you're looking for might be the Canon M50 with the 16 millimeter on it. So just know that investing in the lens is really what's giving you the look overall. But all in all, we love this lens for vlogging, for YouTube videos, and really it's just gonna be a lens that we keep in our kit at all times. And so just know that. I hope there's more than anything, this video was educational to the point that you're probably gonna invest in your lenses and put more money into your lenses than you are your camera bodies. I know it's, when I first got into filmmaking and photography, I was kind of taken back with the idea of having to invest in lenses, because I was like, dude, the camera is taking the picture, but it's the lens that's making the picture look good. And so just keep that in mind when investing into lenses. And that's what you're doing. You're investing into lenses, because if you plan on staying with the same camera brand, your lenses are gonna travel with you. So as you upgrade your camera bodies, your lenses stay the same. And I would tell you that the look that your new camera bodies are gonna give you are gonna be based off of the lenses that you already own. So when you're making that investment, just keep that in mind.
So those are some lenses that you can consider when upgrading the current lens that comes with the Canon M50, what is called the kit lens, right? But without a doubt, my favorite lens for this camera has to be that 16mm lens with that super blurry background. A lot of times that's all people want is like, man, Omar, I just want that blurry background. How do I get it? Well, you get it with the Sigma 16. Nonetheless, if you want to learn about the best microphones to go with this camera, you can do so by clicking or tapping the screen. Other than that, I hope to see you in a future video. Peace.